A very warm welcome to the Creative Dealmaker podcast. I'm Carl Allen, I'm your host, and I'm going to be interviewing expert guests sharing investor strategies that will completely and utterly disrupt the market when it comes to buying and selling businesses all over the world.
While I was a police officer, I was studying for supervisory exams, and I actually got promoted to sergeant, and I actually supervised 20 guys. And during one of the while studying for one of the exams, I found a section of the vehicle and traffic law, which is about 3 inches thick. And when you're studying for these public sector exams, there's the standard questions that everybody studies, and then there's these 4 or 5 eliminator questions. And the caliber of police officers that my town of Clarkstown got were through the roof. We had lawyers, we had accountants, we had nuclear engineers, we had really, really, really highly educated cops. So you had to study really hard for these exams. And on one of the exams, I was studying for what's called eliminator questions. And I came across a section that essentially said, at the request of a local chief of police, the commissioner of motor vehicles will forward to the chief of police a list of all suspended and revoked driver licenses in that jurisdiction. So I kind of highlighted it thinking that might be a good question on the test. But in the back of my mind, I've always been kind of a computer nerd. And I'm like, wow, what a great list to have. Long story short, didn't get promoted to sergeant on that test. I did get promoted on the next test. But that section of the vehicle and traffic law gave me the idea to not start the business that I sold, but in a law enforcement capacity. Computers were just starting to go into police cars.
Yeah.
And I requested from my chief of police permission to request of the commissioner of motor vehicles a list of all these suspended and revoked operators. Ran into a lot of resistance. A lot of people didn't understand it. A lot of people didn't know how to get it to me. And I was like, listen, it's in the vehicle and traffic law. I have a letter from my chief of police requesting it. I want it. So with some help for some local politicians, a couple of trips to Albany, I ended up getting shipped to me, again, dating myself, Carl, a stack of like those 35, not the big floppy ones, but the little square ones, the 3.5-inch ones, 35 of them, slapped them into my 40-pound laptop with Lotus 123. And out of 80,000 residents, I had a few thousand suspended and revoked operators. And my arrest numbers went from 2 or 3 a month to 13, 14, 15 a month. It was like shooting fish in a barrel. So I started handing these things out to all my fellow police officers. I was featured on the news. It was huge PR. A lot of these suspended and revoked drivers were committing a lot of felonies and causing a lot of accidents, getting into chases and stuff. So I did that as a police officer. And then I realized the libertarian in me, I just armed law enforcement with this handheld strategic nuclear weapon. I figured I would try and start a business selling this data. So I went to my chief and my town council at the time. They gave me permission to start a business. I'm super creative, so I called it License Monitor Inc. I ended up having the data as a private business, won a national business plan competition, grew it to several $million dollars, Con Edison and Keyspan and Cablevision, claims adjusters, pest control, anybody with drivers. I had 350 out of 700 school districts in New York State. So I grew that, and then I sold that to private equity. And so anyway, I'm rambling along here. That's my background. Is that
great? So this is really interesting, right? So a couple of things, right? 2 takeaways from me is I think, a lot of people like mistakenly think that public sector work is like, it's the wrong thing to do if you want to make a bunch of money being an entrepreneur. And for you discovered like a gap in the market. You had an opportune moment and you were able to become an entrepreneur, which if you'd not have been a police officer, and mindset, discipline, productivity, that flows from that kind of role. And those are great skills that you can feed into like deal making. But you would never have found that opportunity if you hadn't have been in that. I think that's really interesting.
Had I not been studying for that exam, I never would have come across that section and had the background in IT that I had. I was very blessed. My father, through the best man at my wedding, his father had a connection out in Cupertino, California. I had one of the first Apple IIe computers ever in the country. I know I had one of the top 3 or 4 in New York State at a no hard drive, 5.25-inch floppy, 64K of RAM, a little Apple IIe. So I was a very early kind of computer nerd guy. And then every semester of high school and every summer of high school and every semester and summer of college, I had to work. If I didn't have money, I didn't have money for books or beers. and I wanted to have money. So I worked in a lot of different industries, a lot of the computer industries, and
that's so cool. So let's talk about that exit of the company to kind of private equity. Like, what did you learn through that process that gave you some chops, some insights to a future career as a buyer of businesses? Like, what did that PE deal kind of teach you?
Well, I'll tell you, I learned a lot. I'm a kind of a knowledge junkie, but the process in and of itself was, I don't know how to say, it was a pain in the ass, man. It was, these guys crawled up one side in, back down. I mean, they analyzed everything. They understood things about my business that, I hadn't even thought about. I mean, they discovered one of my sales reps. I gave permission to change something in one of our standardized agreements, and I guess he changed it in Word, and it became like the new standard on the server, and it just kept going. And I closed. It wasn't that big of a deal. It was one minor thing. But anyway, they made me go back to all of my customers that signed that agreement and re-sign them to do like the purchase. The level of detail, the level of due diligence, it was simultaneously impressive, but also a complete pain in the ass, because, as you know, Carl, you're either working in your business or on your business, and having these people in your office and flying in and like people tearing through your books and so it was a process. But at the end of the day, the offer they made me was well north of anything I ever dreamed of ever having. So it was very, very exciting. I sold it for 12 times EBITDA, which was just remarkable.
Wow, really?
Yeah, until I found out one of my competitors sold for 22 times, but that was like 3 years later.
We're not in that market anymore.